Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth. Are you facing the challenges of divorce and feeling overwhelmed? Introducing Divorce 101, your essential online course designed to empower you through the divorce process. I'm Heather Quick, attorney and CEO at Florida Women's Law Group. Gain confidence and clarity with expert guidance on legalities, financial considerations, and your emotional well-being. We believe in empowering you to navigate this journey with strength and knowledge. Enroll in Divorce 101 today and take control of your future. As a valued podcast listener, you will get $100 off the course. So please see the show notes for the promo code and the link. You can also find out more at floridawomensLawGroup.com or always call us at 904-567-0121. Divorce for women by women. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, we have Nancy Brodzki. Nancy is a family law attorney, founding partner at Brodzki Jacobs in South Florida, a mediator and a pioneer of LGBTQ rights. She is joining us to talk about mediation and how to have the most effective mediation. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here.
We are, as I was telling you at the beginning, love to have attorneys on the show. We have a lot of different things, but I love having attorneys, especially Florida attorneys, because when we are talking about so many of the same things that apply to a lot of our listeners, obviously, because they are in Florida. So, Nancy, for our listeners, we'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey as an attorney and to where you are now.
Well, I will give you the very Reader's Digest version because my story is got a lot of interesting twists and turns. I've been an attorney for over 38 years. I was sworn in on the same day that the shuttle Challenger blew up. So I always have that as the reminder of the day I was sworn in 1986. I practiced with a large firm for about a year. But was mostly as a law clerk, writing and research. I worked for a solo practitioner. I worked for a small firm. And since late 1988, I have been either on my own or working with my partner, Andrea Jacobs, with whom we formed our law firm in 2012. And I've been a mediator since 2008. And I have been a trial attorney for 38 years. I am trying to no longer be a trial attorney and to wind that down and focus on mediation, collaborative divorce. And I've always focused on settlement-focused divorce, but I'm no longer going to be the one walking into the courtroom to try the case.
Well, I totally understand that. And I really appreciate throughout the years, great mediators, and those attorneys who really, can help people get to a compromise, which I think we both agree is better in the long run when it's possible.
Well said.
Because it's not always
said,
right. Because
really.
both parties have to really be willing and want that. And when it's possible, it's great. Sometimes you just have to litigate because
there's no questions about
you
that.
just got to, right? And I have found throughout the years of my experience, and then with members of my team as well, that when mediation, I find if one party is, I always say, greedy, or just so unreasonable, like it's not going to settle. And you do have to be willing to stand up for yourself and go to court, go to trial, because they are so way off base, and, they're not listening to mediator or their lawyer. That's what you got to do. And usually I feel like, if you're trying to be reasonable and settle and you understand where it's going to fall in the law, you end up all right. It's just not maybe the path you wanted, but it'll get you there.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. The biggest issue with cases that end up going to trial is that someone cannot move off of their chosen best day in court, that there is just something that they cannot bring themselves to do. And yesterday's trial that I completed on that was primarily about time sharing was a classic example of when you have a parent who had a history of substance abuse, but has now a period of sobriety, and it's an initial proceeding. And you've got one parent who's done this, the substance abuse parent had done a year's worth of supervised visits and drug tests. When one parent says, okay, I've done everything I can do, I want a real time sharing schedule now, and the other parent still can't let go of their vision of that parent as an addict or alcoholic, and then all they can bring themselves to offer is more supervised visits, you cannot resolve that case because what the two people want are completely incompatible. And even in that case at mediation, we offered a phased in approach to working up. We were unable to get there, and we really never even got close. And so we had to go to trial. It worked out well for my client. My client got 50-50 time sharing of his little boy. So
well, and and that is such a great example of what I just said, right? And it's hard. I think particularly, in a substance abuse type case, in my experience, the one parent who is not, the addict, but they've been codependent, like they've been in this relationship for so long, they do have a hard time letting go, and it's due to anger, maybe a lot of fear.
Oh yeah.
And I think we can both, we can understand where they're coming from. However, it's but the judge isn't going to be that understanding. They're going to be like, what else can we make this person do? Right. And I know that, the courts up here, and I'm sure down there are, hey, if there's a relapse, nobody wants a child to be in danger, but we can't say you never get your child again because you had a problem.
Did you read my closing argument? Because that honestly was in the headline version of my closing argument. Seriously, like you lifted it right out of my iPad. But it's exactly true. So the fear can, and fear is such a powerful motivator. And when we're talking about whether you're mediating or whether you're getting a client ready for mediation and walking them through the process, we have to know that our clients are very fearful in large part, or they're very angry. I find that people are either fear-based or they're anger-based. And then the ones who are really neutral are the ones that you have the easiest time settling with. But when you've got someone who's consumed with fear or anger, you've got your hands full, because that is the biggest obstacle to helping them make decisions. And I like to tell people that they're always afraid of the unknown. The future that is unknown is a scary thing. And I like to normalize that. And I think lawyers do their clients a service when they say, we're not astronauts, we're not Navy pilots. Those people don't have the same fear of the unknown that the other 98% of us are born with. And we're afraid, and it's okay to be afraid, but we need to recognize the fear, and then we need to make decisions based on all of the best available information, and then give them that information in a format that they can absorb. Because I find that women's fears are primarily around, I'm not going to have enough money. Time sharing, there's a lot less really to argue over now. People still will.
They
We will
will.
still have our hands full. There's no question about it. But, you know, more people are going to accept the fact that equal time sharing is the norm, and that telling their lawyer that they were the one who did everything during the intact marriage, that's not going to hold any water going forward. That's a meaningless item now. And your co-parent needs to basically be unavailable or unfit to get less than equal time sharing. You know, it's going to be very hard to overcome. And the financial piece, though, is so fearful and fear-inducing for many of our clients. And we have to help them recognize that fear and then educate them, make it so that they feel empowered. A lot of women have sort of a inferiority complex where it comes to finance. Not all women. I don't want to be gender biased by any stretch, but they really do have to be made sure that they understand the numbers in a way that is not condescending and pejorative, but makes them empowered. And you encourage them to say, you can do this. I have confidence that you can do this.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. And that it really is, we're not going to get all, I have a few questions before we get into mediation, but I've always been a litigator, and early in my career, I was definitely very much ready to go to court, especially if I felt like my client was the underdog. And I was like, we need to set the tone. You need to everybody needs to see what the court's going to do, but it's not as accessible as there are more people getting divorced. Seems like the same number of judges, right? And as the laws have changed, and I believe they have evolved to reflect a large majority of society nowadays, but that it's going to make a lot of sense to mediate, because I've always tried to, we've helped our clients with, like, listen, mediation is the opportunity for you maybe to craft something that you're not going to get with a judge, but you have to be willing to maybe give something that they wouldn't get with a judge, but yet that's really is possible. That's why I call it the women winning divorce, because if you are getting something you want, and so are they, well, you've both won, and you really can both win if we really approach it with that understanding that you got to give to get a little, and it can happen. I mean, we know there's our minority of cases like your trial yesterday where it's just not possible. But I think in the large majority, it is, and people can understand that. And it's like, wouldn't you rather craft something that is more individual to your family and the things that mean the most to you? If possible. It's not always possible, but.
Right. And statistically, that's true. I did research statistics because I teach lawyers and I teach mediation. And the statistics show that only 5% of all the divorces filed in the state of Florida go in front of a judge. And that's high. Nationally, the statistics a little bit lower, but Florida, a little bit more litigious for reasons we could spend a whole other podcast talking about. But the truth is, why should you be one of the 5% that has to go in front of a judge? Why shouldn't you take control of your life and of your situation and craft the very best outcome that you can? Because the court is both a casino and a butcher. They're like the cleaver. We're gonna cut it into they cut a whole animal into quarters, right? 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, boom, you've got your pieces.
Mm-hmm.
In mediation or collaborative divorce, you can use a scalpel, a laser scalpel, and you can cut, intricate patterns into your life that the
Mm-hmm.
judge is never going to give you. They don't
Never.
do nuance in court.
Right.
But in mediation or collaborative or negotiation, you can be creative and you can craft an outcome that is really tailored to your family. And that's an
Yeah.
opportunity that people should really, that's how they should be looking at the kind of mediation process.
I agree, right? Just because it's required doesn't mean you can't make the most of it and make it very beneficial. And I think that does really, I mean, I'm glad, you teach, because I think it does come to the lawyers. And if they're willing to counsel their clients in that manner, not all lawyers are, and which does a disservice, I think, to their clients, and really be ready to mediate and hope to resolve it, because that's how we do the best for the majority of people, I think, that are going through this situation.
It is. And I think for your listeners and your followers, that it's really important for you to be in charge of your own future, and your lawyer needs to reflect your goals, not the
Mm-hmm.
other way around. So
Yes.
when you're choosing the lawyer, you want to choose a lawyer whose goals and methodologies are aligned with what you want. You want a knockdown, drag out thermonuclear war for your divorce? There are plenty of lawyers who would be very happy to charge, $100,000, $200,000 to set fire to your entire financial life, make your spouse cry, depose everybody they've ever worked with. They can make a real mess if that's what you really want. I don't find too many people are looking for that at the outset. There are plenty of times clients are angry about a thing or something, but the lawyers can either be the gasoline on that fire, or they can be the blanket that helps put that fire out and that helps the client focus on solutions. And I really call it being a solutions-focused lawyer or a settlement-focused lawyer. And if what you really want to do, and I kind of submit what you really should be doing, is trying to create the very best outcome that you can, visualize, vision plan what you want that to look like. Try to work with a lawyer and a mediator who can support you in trying to achieve that kind of vision, because the only way that's going to happen is if you focus on settlement and solutions rather than, winning, because it's not about winning. Winning isn't what you think it is.
Well, in that we do disagree. I do think you can win and settle at the same time, but it depends how you frame it. It's all about reframing it and what that means to you. But
Oh yeah,
I do want to touch on that you are credited with filing and obtaining the first same-sex divorce in Florida in 2014, and I really would love it if you could share a little bit about that for me and our listeners.
I would be happy to. Definitely the highlight of my professional career. Now, to be clear, for a number of years prior to 2014, we know that divorces had been granted for same-sex couples, we'll call it under the radar. There were plenty of judges, particularly in South Florida, whose idea was, who is here to complain? If they both want the divorce, why am I not going to grant it? Yes, I know that there is a constitutional amendment that says I don't have the jurisdiction to do that, but really, does anybody really care? And so those were all, happening. But what happened was in the summer of 2013, a woman that I knew as the girlfriend of another friend of mine had told me that she was civilly united. She's civil union partnered with a woman out of a civil union in Vermont. And she had asked me prior to 2013, could she get divorced in Florida? And I laughed and I said no. It was shortly after Florida passed its constitutional ban on recognizing same-sex marriages for any purpose or unions that were the legal equivalent for any purpose. But in 2013, some of you may remember, there was a famous case. It went to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's called the United States versus Windsor, and it overturned the Defense of Marriage Act and basically said that states had to give full faith and credit to the other states. And if somebody was legally married in a state, that had to be recognized by the federal government. And so we decided to file a divorce and challenge the constitutional ban. In September of 2013, we had to jump through a bunch of procedural hoops. In August of 2014, the judge made a declaratory judgment, which is kind of like an interim step, saying that that statute wasn't a statute. That constitutional provision was itself unconstitutional, and that the statute that said a marriage could only be between a man and a woman was also unconstitutional. And then in December of 2014, he granted a final judgment of divorce as a result of that successful challenge. And 3 weeks later, Florida got same-sex marriage by virtue of another decision from another judge that was a federal judge in the Northern District of Florida.
Well,
so I'm a footnote.
You are, and what a great thing, though. You know, really have right. Give divorce to more people, right?
You know, activist is really. I was the accidental activist because I didn't advertise to look for a client to go do this. Someone who was already in my life by virtue of extension to a friend had a problem. Yep. She hadn't seen her partner in years. That was part of the delay. We had to try to find her, and we had to run down a bunch of leads that turned out to be nothing. And finally we served her by publication. Apparently she didn't want to be found. Oh. And but we you know, she came to me. She had the problem, and I said, let's try it. And we did it.
That's really that's great, and I'm glad you shared that. Thank you, because you know that is a big deal in footnote in the case law. Now we kind of jumped into mediation when we started, but for our listeners, and we've certainly done shows on mediation before, but I always like to, you know, go through it again and really give, if you don't mind, an explanation to our listeners who, you know, may or may not have encountered that, may be thinking about divorce, and just understanding what is mediation, because not everybody really understands what it is.
Sure. And mediation can take a number of different forms. So you have sort of a couple of different options. Mediation without lawyers can look like you and your spouse sitting with a single mediator who may or may not be recommending that you consult with lawyers as part of the process of preparing for mediation. I always do that. Not all mediators do. I want the clients to get legal advice from lawyers, because the one thing mediation isn't is the mediator is neutral. They're neutral as to the parties and as to the outcome. And so they cannot give either party advice on what they should or should not do, or give them advice on how they think any particular issue might be decided by a court. The mediator gets to educate the clients on the law, but that is not the same as advising them as to how that law might apply to their facts. And that's exactly what the mediator shouldn't be doing. So you can go to a mediator, and sometimes you're in the same room together with the mediator, and sometimes the mediator might speak privately one-on-one with each party. at any point during the mediation process, depending on how it's progressing. If it's going well with everybody in the same room, I've done entire mediations for families where the parties were always in the same room the whole time. And then I've done mediations for parties without lawyers where we were separated almost all of the time because the parties weren't able to communicate. And I'm not here to do therapy. Mediation isn't therapy. It's not there to teach you how to communicate. It's there to help facilitate the communication just for that purpose.
And I appreciate that, because Nancy, I think that, you know, we have to recognize the emotionality people come with in a divorce in general. And, you know, and this is for our listeners, sometimes if you're separate, it just can make it so much more successful. You don't get the triggers, right? You're discussing
so
something,
true.
Nancy, and they see that look or the roll of the eye or anything, and it could
that's
blow
the word,
it up.
Trigger. Oh, it and does. Most of the mediation that I do, because I am mostly hired by lawyers who are in litigation on the way to what some of them are hoping is a settlement, and mediation is a requirement. And I call that lawyer facilitated mediation. Now that looks a lot different because we never start together. I don't put them in the same room at all. I start in caucus, whether it's in person in 2 separate conference rooms or it's on Zoom in separate breakout rooms. And I don't put them together for any reason at all. I have seen that go south like nobody's business.
Yeah.
There's a reason that you need help getting divorced. If you and your spouse could sit at the kitchen table and write it all out on a pizza box, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. You would have just gone, look, we walked down to the courthouse and we did it together. And people do that. There's a small percentage, I imagine. But most people need help because, let's face it, a pervasive reason that people get divorced, whether it is a chicken or the egg, whether it's a cause or it's an effect, is bad communication. You're in disagreement over serious things, different priorities, different goals, different choices, and you cannot communicate effectively to resolve it. So you're getting divorced. Okay, so now we should suddenly expect you to be able to communicate and resolve these problems. Well, those of us who work in this arena actually don't expect you to be able to do that. And the goal in mediation is to provide the environment that makes settlement most possible. If it's possible, it's in part going to be because the appropriate environment was created so that the parties felt safe in expressing what their goals, needs, fears are, concerns, and that the mediator, by brokering the discussions, kind of being the messenger. So I like to call it shuttle diplomacy. I'm in one room. I explore the issues. I explore their needs, concerns, fears, and goals, and then help come up with what is this proposal. And then when I take that into the other room, I am now a voice that they don't hate. Don't know me long enough to hate me or even have an opinion about me yet. I adopt a very specific mediation demeanor, which is geared toward supporting them, giving them the attention and respect and empathy that they need in order to make decisions, in order to keep them engaged in the process. I am not going to be combative with them or trying to push them or persuade them to accept proposals or become a cheerleader for anybody's proposal. The more difficult the person, the more you just need to give them empathy, attention, and respect. And then once you do that, you can get them negotiating and problem solving. But if you're not willing to hear them and validate that you understand what they've said, you don't have to agree with them, but you say, I understand that you're feeling X, Y, and Z, and that makes sense that you would be mad about that. it's amazing what you can get people to think about in terms of problem solving if you just listen to them. But when two spouses are trying to talk to each other, it's like they're talking at each other, and it's kind of like each one trying to top the other. But in mediation, the mediator takes that entire dynamic, pulls out that dance, and now it's a whole different conversation. And I can't tell you how many times I have been told, oh, but they're never going to agree to that. They told me before we ever came here that they would never agree to that. And all I say is, they might have meant it, and they might still mean it. They might have only meant it at the time. They might not have meant it at all. We're going to find out today. Because at mediation, nothing bad happens. The only thing that happens in mediation is, the worst thing that happens is nothing. Nothing is agreed to. Nobody's harmed. You're not any worse off than you were the day before, except you paid some portion of the fee to the mediator in many cases. But, it's kind of like going to a chiropractor and saying, well, I went, it didn't hurt me. It didn't help me a lot. It wasn't enormously expensive. I guess I have to go to the neurosurgeon now. But it was certainly worth trying to avoid going to the neurosurgeon if a chiropractor with a couple of adjustments can solve the problem. And I think it's a good analogy for what mediation is in comparison to what happens when you start going through a court-centered process of litigation. Like
I agree. That is okay. I'm going to go on record and say that I'm going to bar that. I will absolutely credit Nancy Brodzki for that analogy, but it's brilliant because it's a really good analogy. And it's like, obviously in the real world, we don't have to. Maybe some insurance makes you go to some things, but you do have this opportunity to go to something that isn't going to harm you. And okay, yes, it's going to cost money, far less than the final product. And you may be pleasantly surprised and appreciate that process so much more.
And it's so much less invasive. It's just,
yes,
everything about going for surgery is stressful and invasive. And it's exactly the same as going to court. And it's stressful for lawyers too, by the way. One of the reasons I want to give up litigation entirely is because I'm a perfectionist. I put way too much pressure on myself. I over prepare, which means I don't sleep well before trial because the adrenaline is flowing.
Right.
It's hard to eat. That's not good. It's hard on everybody. So I like a calmer life now as I've gotten older, because I'm not, a spring chicken anymore, as they say. And I'm good with that. I've earned every year that I've fought for to get here. So
absolutely.
I'm certainly not, age is just a number. And you're only as old as you feel. But as for litigation, I feel old. 38 years is a long time to litigate, and I appreciate it. Yesterday and the day before, when I was in trial for 2 days, was a wonderful trial in many aspects because I had a colleague that I really love and admire as my opposing counsel. The teams worked well together. It was a completely cooperative endeavor, except that we didn't agree on what the outcome should be. And we each knew what each other's case was about and what was good and bad. But even the best trial is still horrible.
It's a lot of work. It is. It's so much work. And, I want to, you talked, and I want our listeners to hear what you had to say, because a good mediator, which is so true, you're listening, right? You're listening to each side, and you're empathetic, and you're acknowledging, right? Not validating one emotion or one position, but you're acknowledging they have that. And what I want our listeners to know is the judge does not do that. And the judge is not here, because I bet, I'd be willing to bet, and I'm not really a gambling woman, but I'd bet in the past, Nancy, you have heard from clients, but wait till I tell the judge, wait till the judge hears this. And it's like, it just doesn't work like that.
If I
does
had
it?
$1 for every time somebody had said that to me, I'd have already retired. It's not like you think. You do not get to just
No,
tell your story.
you don't.
It is a scripted back and forth, and
Timed, right? We're under the gun
yeah,
on time.
and you can only answer in certain ways, and there's certain things you can't say, and then you get interrupted with a word that says objection, and then the judge talks, and then you're like, what am I supposed to answer now? You don't even know what's happening. It's, there's nothing good about trial except that it is the end for people who couldn't put an end to it any other way. It's the only benefit of trial is that it's over after a trial, unless there's an appeal.
Correct. And I think it's just, that's why, also that mediation, I think it's good. And as I've interviewed attorneys all over the country, most states, I would say, don't have mandatory mediation for family law. And so they work really hard to encourage their clients. I've talked to several, because obviously I think when you evaluate it and look at the statistics, it's better for people in general. But you will get a chance to tell your story to the mediator, and the great mediators really listen so that the client feels they've been heard. And sometimes that really takes a lot of edge off the emotion, and now they can focus and make decisions.
It's absolutely correct. The more difficult the person, the more important it is for them to feel heard. And it doesn't mean that you're going to settle their case, but I have had more than one super high conflict personality, glaring personality disorders say, for the first time, I feel like somebody listened to me. I didn't agree with a thing the man said. And it wasn't important how I felt on the inside about what he was saying. He felt heard. He didn't feel like I was on his side. He didn't feel, approval. He just felt like, well, finally, somebody's letting me tell them what's important to me.
And do you think, is that how you are able to best manage emotions in a mediation, by setting that stage and allowing that opportunity?
I do. I am a devotee of Bill Eddy. And if you don't know who Bill Eddy is,
I do.
Your listeners should go to Amazon and type in his name, Bill, Bill, Eddy, Eddy. I do not get royalties from any of the sales of his books, but Bill Eddy is a mentor of mine. I have studied with him and done advanced training with him for mediation, and I'm trained in his pioneering method of mediation that I use it in all of my mediations at some level, some more than others, which is all about high conflict and how to manage people who are high conflict people. There's a huge overlap, and this will make sense to all of you who believe that you're married to a narcissist or somebody who's got borderline personality disorder. You may think it's bipolar. It's probably borderline personality. People confuse those two a lot. But the person that you 1 minute loves you and the next minute hates you, that's not bipolar disorder. That's borderline personality. But they're very, very difficult people to work with. And Bill Eddy has written amazing guides in plain language that everybody can use to help them better learn how to communicate with and manage life with someone who is a high conflict personality. And it's all about retraining your brain, much like codependents who are married to addicts and alcoholics. They learn to react in a certain way, and we call it codependence. They're codependent, and their life ebbs and flows with the addict, which is really bad because addicts are that's like riding a roller coaster all the time, blindfolded while on fire, right? That's what it's like being with someone. You never know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And it makes you a little insane. It's not your fault. You are deeply affected by another person's behavior. There is recovery from it, but it takes work, and it takes you learning how to respond in a different way. And it literally takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight, and I should know because I learned to do it over about a 4-year period, 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, when I was married to an alcoholic. And I was like, oh, you mean I don't have to feel angry all the time? And my alcoholic was sober at the time. It's not all about the alcohol. A lot of it's about the isms that underline the, the addiction. And with your high conflict personalities, you have learned a maladaptive way of responding. You're used to defending yourself all the time. Every criticism, you have to go and prove your case about how you really didn't do that. You're being gaslit and you're defending yourself as though you've committed a crime and you're in the police station being questioned under a light, and you don't understand. Why don't they believe you? They are accusing you of having an affair, and you're not having an affair. So how could they be? Because they're having an affair, and projection is what it's all about. Yep. And your reactions are making you feel crazy. Yep. You can learn a new pattern. It takes work. Sometimes it takes therapy. I always recommend people get therapy. I personally love therapy. I told my therapist she's never allowed to retire because I'm going to need her until I die. And I think it's really important for your listeners to know that, because I hear so many people who say, but I can't go to mediation. I'm married to a narcissist. Yes, you can. You can't make any deals with them. They will threaten you with everything under the sun. Bring them to me in mediation, and you will be amazed at what I can get them to do, because I know how to work with them. It's not a guarantee. Their settlement rate is lower than the rest of the population, of course, but many of them are able to make agreements. They are. It just takes the right kind of environment and somebody who knows how to make it their idea, how to get their buy-in and make them understand how it's actually in their own best interest to make an agreement that they can live with. Again, it's not magic. It's not a guarantee. There are a lot of people that have to hear it from a judge that litigation feeds into their worst instincts and will fuel them. And they will not only go to court, but then they'll appeal it. I saw a guy appeal to the Florida Supreme Court to try to get out of paying his child support and alimony.
Wow. I'm not surprised. I know.
Super personality disorder.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, because this is, such a great conversation, because, people are fascinating and, especially when we're talking about mediation, because you as that, objective party that is really trying to create a solution for folks, you have to adjust depending on who shows up, right? Who's in front of you. Now, you did mention to our producer that lots of women go through mediation, then wake up the next day and have buyer's remorse.
Oh yeah.
So I have had that experience with clients many years ago, and I really, for me, it was something that it was an aha moment, because I thought, we all agreed on the terms. And then that particular mediator, really liked him. He has passed away since then. It was many years ago, but he was really then fast, right? And would work up the agreement. And then, then we're in lawyer mode, have kind of shut off from emotional mode, just checking it off. And, the next day she felt like, well, we really rushed at the end. So that began to change because I saw it from her perspective and saw that way. But I think just in general, and I'd love your take on this, what you think, how this can be avoided, and maybe explain to our listeners, why or to at least anticipate maybe why they might feel that way.
It's a great question. And God, it's like I have a story for everything when you've been doing this a long time. But what women should understand is, number one, you should never sign an agreement that you're not prepared to sign. You should never sign an agreement because you're tired and it's the end of the mediation and they're telling you that if you don't sign it, you might not have an agreement tomorrow. And that's, you know, a doomsday scenario. I think when you go into the mediation, first of all, you need to go in with your own checklist of what's important to you to be in that agreement. What are your deal breakers? What are your bottom lines about things? And it should be something you can look at. I mean, really, not just because your brains get flooded with cortisol, the flight or fight hormone, when you're in tense situations, and mediation will feel tense. So you're not doing your best thinking at the moment that you need to do your best thinking. So you need to prepare and know your checklist so that later, when the hormones are raging and your heart is racing and your mind is racing and you're being asked to read an agreement that's got a lot of legal language in it that you're not really sure you understand, you need to make sure that, number one, you're working with an attorney and or a mediator that has the patience to explain it to you word by word, line by line, and not encouraging you to not worry about it. You need to worry about it. This will likely be one of the most important things you will ever sign in your life, and you have to understand what it says. I think that a lot of people get pressured into signing an agreement on the same at the mediation. You've been in negotiations for 7.5 hours. They've spent an hour writing up the agreement. You're barely eaten all day because you're so anxious. And now it's 7:30 at night and they want you to sign an agreement. The first thing you need to learn is say no. Learn that it's okay for you to say, I'm not ready to sign this tonight. I'd like to go get a good night's sleep. I'd like to review it tomorrow when I'm fresh. I'd like to think about it so that anything that comes up, any of my whatabouts and what ifs, then I could speak to my lawyer about it. And you're gonna get pushback. There are too many lawyers out there, in my opinion, who are too focused on getting a signed agreement right then and there. And I think that's a mistake for the lawyers. And
I
I
agree.
definitely think it's a mistake for the clients, because while everybody wants a deal, especially for those of you who've been in abusive relationships, you particularly have to watch out for the desire to go, oh, just over with. If he'll just leave me alone, I'll sign anything. When a client says that, alarm bells go off in my head like flashing lights. That is no frame of mind to be making these kinds of decisions. So don't be bullied into signing until you've gotten all your questions answered. And if you aren't really confident, don't sign it. If it's a good agreement on a Monday night, it'll still be a good agreement on Wednesday or Thursday or 2 weeks later. Will they still agree to what they agreed to? You know, there's no guarantees until two people sign an agreement. But if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And better you don't sign an agreement than sign an agreement that you regret as soon as the ink is dry. And I made that mistake as a lawyer, and it was the last time I made that mistake, because it only has to happen to me once. I've made plenty of mistakes. One day I'm going to write a book about all the mistakes I've made, because they're all learning opportunities. And the learning opportunity was, do not try to settle a case at 8:30 at night on a Friday when the mediator had tickets to go somewhere, and we're getting late and a mistake was made. And the mistake should have been easy to rectify, except that one party was being a, you know what? And he refused. to rectify the mistake. And the judge gave us a choice. Either you fix it among yourselves, or he's throwing out the entire agreement and you can go back to square one and start over. Well, Lord knows I did not want to do that. He owed my client $5,000. He would only give her $2,500 of the money. I wrote off the other $2,500 to make her whole so that I wouldn't have to go back to square one, because I blamed myself for the error. I should have caught it. And the reason I didn't was because it was 8:30 at night on a Friday after a 10.5-hour mediation, and I was tired. And we all wanted to go home.
And I think that's so important. And, the longer I've practiced, I'm more bold. And I do think for our listeners know that. And we know our clients, and we talk about it as a team, like, wherever you guys get, you may just have to say to the mediator, she's in no position to sign tonight, and we're going to go home. And I think this will be a good agreement, but I can't ask her to sign. Yeah. It's too long of a day, and, we'll have to revisit it tomorrow. And overall, the attorneys may balk on the other side and be like, well, now or never. And you should never be pressured to do that. And for our listeners, you must tell your attorney, because you can get so overwhelmed with decision fatigue that you forgot you agreed to all these things, or you just need to clear your head. And that's one of the things that I do think with mediation. Sometimes there's so many issues, and we'll say, we really need 2 days, because we can't, I've finished mediations at 1 a.m. And I know likewise with many of my team members, they have as well. And, those are few and far between, because I recognize, like, no, I think we need 2 days, because we're not going to get it done in 1 day. And not all attorneys will agree to that, but you really need to make sure your attorney is in tune with where you are, because it is, right? Why regret something that you can't change? That's the thing that's so important. And
yeah, once it's signed, it's done. Yeah. Absent fraud or somebody literally holding a gun to your head, it's not going to be set aside because you felt the pressure of mediation, which is often, analogized to the pressure of buying a car. You want the car, you want to leave. Why are you not leaving? Why are you feeling like you're having to battle against the guy selling you the car in order to walk out with a car? Mediation can feel like that. Like you're being held captive. You want it to be over. You just want to leave with an agreement. Why is it taking so long? I am a big believer in splitting the mediation up into smaller bites. And I think it makes for better decisions and happier outcomes. Happier clients. I think clients are happier when they had more time to process it. I think lawyers are happier when they get it over with quickly.
I agree. And I think that it comes down to preparation, really understanding the issues. As clients, you have a responsibility to go with your attorney, understand with your attorney, what are the issues, and, where's that range? And that's like your checklist. And then you can go in and you're like, wait, I said this was the range and we're not there. So, maybe we need to revisit that. Maybe we need to move to something else, or maybe we need to pause and come back another day when, we can regroup. But, this has been a great conversation, Nancy. I love it. I think you and I could talk for several hours, right, on these topics, because we both really want to help people, but we understand there can be so many obstacles and things that we want to caution them about. But as we're nearing the end of our time, I would love it if you could impart on our listeners what you've learned about women and their resilience throughout your career.
Wow, it's a great question. I have been privileged to see a lot of women who, when they come to me, are like wilted flowers. You can imagine the flower that is like, if you don't water it soon, it's just going to die. And that's how I've seen many women come into my office, in that kind of a mental state of being wilted. And I've been privileged to see their journeys into being empowered women. And I was saying this to a client just the other day, because we've been working together for about over a year and a half now. And it's been horrible. And she was in an abusive relationship, and she was all reactive in the beginning. And it was, 4 times a day emails about the latest thing and this, that, and the other. And now she's like, oh yeah, he did that. I was going to tell you about it eventually. She's come so far in her journey of now she doesn't react to every little thing he does, because I've helped her learn that she needs to accept that that's who he's always going to be, that there may be a point in the future where he picks somebody else because eventually this will be over, but that this is always going to be who he is. And the only thing she can change is herself. And what I see is when women are supported by the right kind of professionals around them, and that can include your lawyer, it can include a divorce coach, it can include a therapist, your healthcare team, a personal trainer, and learning some important self-care rituals that work for you. For me, it's nature and music. For other people, it's yoga. For some people, and there's a spiritual practice. I'm a spiritual person. Some people, it's religion or the spiritual practice. But I've seen women make leaps and bounds changes in their lives as part of this process. So my advice would be, don't let your fear drive the bus. Bring on a good team around you. Trust in the process that you've educated yourself about and that you've opted into. And you don't have to believe that it's all going to be okay. Just believe that the team around you believes that it's all going to be okay. And then you will eventually experience that incredible lightness of being, of coming out the other side and going, wow, I didn't know life could be like this. I got so used to always reacting to what this other person wanted, needed, or how they felt. I didn't even realize that deep down, I'm just this calm homebody who really loves curling up with a good book and a cup of tea. And I didn't want to have to do all these other things that was this person's life. It wasn't what I wanted. I was living somebody else's life. And that's what awaits all of you who make this transition, because that's what divorce is. It's a transition from one phase of life to another. And, we call them growth experiences in Al-Anon, and divorce is the biggest growth experience of them all.
Indeed it is. That's, I appreciate that so much, Nancy. And, but lastly, before we go, where can our listeners find you for more information and resources?
Well, you can always reach me by email at Nancy@BJB, that's Bravo Jackson Bravo, lawyers, plural.com. I am very Googleable, so you can find me. My social media is not for the faint of heart. So my Facebook is private, but my Threads is not. But be warned, it's not for everybody. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And we can always be reached to help you through mediation. And it's my website is www.bjblawyers.com. And you can read all about my experience as a mediator, my training, and how I love to help families through mediation and other alternative dispute resolution like collaborative divorce, which is a whole nother podcast on a different methodology of the same thing, focusing on settlement in a structured setting in order to solve all of the problems.
Well, Nancy, we've reached the end of our show today. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on our show today. I really enjoyed our discussion on mediation and emotions and people, and really coming to the best results for our clients. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I too really enjoyed the conversation.
Wonderful. Well, listeners, if you or someone you know is going through a divorce or is thinking about a divorce, either in the Northeast Florida area or South Florida, please reach out to us at floridawomensLawGroup.com or join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce, where we have created a community of women and have positive and supportive conversations. Of course, Nancy's firm and her links will be in the episode description. So if you have an issue in South Florida, she will be your person, and all of those links will be available for you below. And of course, if you enjoyed the show, we'd truly appreciate a 5-star review to help other women going through similar challenges find us. And for everyone else, thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.